Good evening. My name is Presbyterian. I'm the pastor at the Second Presbyterian Church. It is my great delight to welcome you here this evening. One thing that we get to do with this beautiful sanctuary here in the middle of Charleston, smack down in the middle of the broad, the battery down there, the side over here, we are on the highest spot in Charleston. And we take this very seriously. That we might be a service we're planning. So I think many people come in through these doors and they have a sense of welcome that is absolutely genuine. So everyone is welcome here, and because we have this big, because we have this campus, we also have the Charleston Academy of Music that is housed with us, so the color of music in terms of a wonderful classical organization. So we get to do a lot of things and we leverage our space. But one thing we get to do except for the best purpose, is to host things like this. A couple of years ago, maybe longer than that, we hosted the first Interreligious after the fasting right over there. And it was a wonderful experience. And so when Dina contacted us about our being able to host this, it was my great delight. In terms of boards and approval and anything else, there was no question at all, because we had the privilege of having two individuals who had made their mark and who were so not only knowledgeable and passionate about the things that matter to us today. So this is what matters to this church, and I think all of you, that's why you're here. So once again, welcome. It's back in my bed. We're going to be sharing a lovely meal across the way, so I hope you get a chance to say hello to you.
So good evening, everybody, including those watching online. It's an honor for the Charleston Interreligious Council, Dr. Susan and John Green, this evening as our 5th annual James Sawyer's Junior Interfaith Speaker Series, Keynote Speakers. The Charleston Interreligious Council was established in 1979 to build bridges of understanding, sensitivity, respect, and fellowship among people of all religions. And we believe that in doing so, we are helping create a better, more harmonious Charleston. We do this through our speaker series and various events throughout the area. This annual Interfaith Speaker Series is named for CIC's past president, Reverend Dr. James Sawyers Jr., who passed away unexpectedly in 2017. Jim was a minister and scientist and cared deeply about the intersection of science and religion. I'm sure he would have been very pleased with a focus on faith and climate change today. On behalf of CIC, I would like to thank the St. Francis Healthcare and Mission Department for making this possible, and to the College of Charleston, the International African American Museum for the partnership, and to Second Presbyterian Church for hosting this. Please welcome everybody coming in, lots of seats. Come on up, make yourself welcome. My name is Dr. Papa, and I'm a senior instructor in the School of Humanities and Social Sciences at the College of Charleston. And I'm affiliated with Environmental and Sustainability Studies program, Women's and Gender Studies program. I also direct the college's Sustainability Literacy Institute, dedicated to infusing triple bottom line thinking, the triple bottom line of sustainability, social, environmental, and system. And problem solving across the curricular at College of Charleston, to help prepare tutors to solve the wicked problems of the 21st century, of which climate change will be a threat. During my academic training in the directorship of the SLI and thus access to some institutional funds, I jumped at the possibility to not only sponsor some visit of today's speakers to Charleston, but I'm also honored to introduction. First, some housekeeping. I'd like to offer a land acknowledgement to Natchez as the people of within this land of Southern Charleston originally belonged. Part of Ecojustice is grappling with the ongoing racialized violence of Charleston, larger U.S. policies, especially in the context of carbon colonialism. So I want to call attention to that area. There's a panel discussion tomorrow at 2:00 p.m. in the Alumni Center, School of Education, at the corners of St. Philip and Wilson Street on the Charleston campus. The panelists will include Alicia Brewster, Omar Mohammed, Queen Quetz, Regina Scott Saunders, who's also speaking tonight, John Green, who will be moderated by the Religious Studies Department of Charleston. It's 2 p.m. tomorrow, Friday, at Alumni Center, which is in the School of Education on the corner of St. Phil. Then on Saturday, real quick, that panel is on Interfaith, Ecojustice, and local community activism. On Saturday, it's a 10 o'clock Unitarian Church for Archdiocese, Interfaith community discussion on clergy coming together to combat moderated by Dr. Ziegler of the University of Army. Again, that's the Unitarian Church for Archdale, 10 o'clock a.m. Saturday, March 5th. And that will include the Reverend Willie Rutledge, Imam Herbert Fraser, Reverend Heather Mann, Reverend Rebecca Hines. And that, again, on a faith community discussion on clergy coming together to combat climate change. Lastly, before continuing, the church asks you to keep your mask on as you're walking. And comments are closed, please. The bathroom is out in the hall. Take a left, right, to the right. And after the talk, there'll be a question and answer. And then the deacon campus in the council hall next door. With that housekeeping complete, let's set a bit of context for tonight's speakers. As we all know, Russia made it famous. Also, that news was another important note, the AR6 synthesis report from the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, which once again paints a very sobering future for our species, and all the others with whom we share this today. However, I want to point out that this report, like most of the last ones over many years, here I have hopes as in the former president of climate change at the Chinese hoax. Not that kind of hoax. The hoax is that people will pay attention to another report and be motivated to change behaviors to get off of fossil fuels and animal-based agriculture diets based on that approach. A report that unequivocally suggests Charleston and most other coastal cities will be seriously compromised by sea level rise in the century. Or a report that says there is a rapidly closing window we have to adapt and finally fight the shift. Similar language has been used before, yet here we are, with most whole metrics still being used. It seems Moloch and Mammon, the state of God, for archetypal love worship, still God the North Star, men and power. So I think it's a hoax that a scientific report will magically get us to take seriously what plants about past taps will be used for the extreme rain events and heat waves to boot, as we shift into this biogeochemical reality in the years, decades, and centuries to come. Rather, the eco-theologian Catherine Keller, speakers, points out that the term apocalypse originally meant seeing anew, a new revelation, a new vision, or rather a chance. I think the series of events that Charleston Interreligious Council in this series of events, the CIC is asking us to see, especially in the context of this recent apocalyptic AR6 synthesis report, and the recent apocalyptic NOAA finding that there will be 1 foot of sea level rise. This is the reality of Charleston, that we are highly climate vulnerable and facing eventual relocation, and that our shared community is riddled with ongoing environmental racism and injustices that climate change ultimately brings. If we don't confront these legacies through policy and advocacy. Therefore, the context of this week's program must be struck by another term often associated with religious traditions, neighborhoods. In short, what I think climate change is really linked to us, and that science can really help us with, is how to be better neighbors to one another, to see one another in sacred places where we dwell with eyes fresh and new, and to commit to the political work to save our neighbors, and to see this work as divine work and sacred work, which we are vocationally called by our discernment, care for the community. There must be neighborliness that crosses species barriers, and that stretches into the future. Climate justice work is a true pro-life work for religious communities. My training is in studying religious communities, starting with taking time to activism and how these communities are being interpreted. This academic field is requiring another institutional ecology of religion and nature. It's internationally robust. In many ways, those its existence to visionary work about this work of the into their coalition building and advocacy based on the remarkable background being given to all. Mary Evelyn Tucker and Dr. met students at Thomas Berry in American in 1970, and they have collaborated in life and work excellence. His teachings of the world religions were the basis of their work on religious ecology. Whereas today, they are professors and co-directors at Yale University Department of Religion and Ecology, a multi-religious project exploring religious worldviews, texts, and ethics in order to broaden an understanding of the complex nature of current environmental concerns. They have also edited, authored, and convened too many books, articles, and workshops anytime or later, many of which have been labs and many courses. Dr. Mary Ellen Tucker, senior lecturers and research scholars at New University in the School of Environment, the Divinity School, and the Department of Urban Studies. They co-directed Yale Forum on Religion and Ecology. They've also religious projects exploring religious worldviews, texts, and ethics in order to broaden understanding of the complex nature of current environmental problems, including that of climate change. They are also the creators of the new courses series, Religion and Ecology, Restored to the Community. Mary Evelyn and John will discuss the decades of work at the intersection of ecology and world change. As informed by the Dr. Thomas Berry, with a hopeful, deep-time perspective on our evolving universe. Please join me in giving a neighborly welcome to these esteemed elders who have taught many how to uncover what it means to humans dedicate to justice, both earthly and social, as we speak tonight on the integration of ecospirituality and ecojustice.
Thank you so much for this beautiful introduction and context setting. Really appreciate that. I think it's the first time that we've been introduced as elders. And I don't know whether to be shocked or gratified, but thank you for everything that you just said. And special thanks to being a focus motion. Thank you. Thank you. Council of Charleston, along with the Lodge Speaker, both the council and the College of Charleston. Thank you so much.
I join with Mary Ellen in thanking the organizers, and especially yourself for coming out tonight, the pastor of the church, very warm welcome here. Our presence is a strong affirmation of the interreligious approach of the council here in Charleston to focus on the climate emergency, climate change, brings us the possibility of understanding what religions can bring to these issues. We are responding in so many ways now, but we need to deepen that response. And the interreligious approach brings novel and new possibilities when the environment, or especially climate change, becomes a position for interreligious dialogue.
So the climate emergency is reshaping religions. And the essence of these comments are really that, as I think you know, we need a worldview change, a paradigm shift. Sounds abstract, but it's not. And we also, with that paradigm shift, implies that humans are part of nature, not a part of climate. It's as simple as that, and yet it's real. And the second part is that we need values change, a broadening of ethics to include nature and humans.
I'm like, this is crazy. A social worker told her about a new program where she could get 500 without.
We wanted to enter into our remarks by giving you some idea of our development in the ecology project, and then to talk a bit about the forum on religion and ecology before we move into was very pleased to hear the landscape that's given, and also the reference to environmental racism. These are issues of our time, and they are in my own formation. I come from North Dakota. I went through my education as grade school, high school in Fargo, North Dakota. I did not learn anything about the native peoples of the United States. 3 major reservations near not that far from Fargo. So I'm very aware of the kind of environmental racism that entered into the formation of all of us and carried into my work. And so I came to this religion and ecology work through my studies with First Nations, Native American, Indigenous peoples on this continent. I initially wrote a dissertation focused on Ojibwe peoples who call themselves Anishinaabe. So the restoration of old names for the people has been happening now for several decades. These northern peoples then led me to introductions to Crow people. So the English term was used when the Crows speak English. They had their own language, and 9,000 people people central Montana. They call themselves Oxalocates, and they've been the focus of my research since the 1980s, and really now it's visiting with families, not just academic research. But I also, since 1985, have been studying winter dance ceremonies at this time of year. So I'm very oriented towards the symbolic and religious value of Native people. So my understanding of religion and ecology came through the ceremonial religious life of people. So I actually like the term lifeway when talking about indigenous traditions. Rather than religion as something separate from everyday life, lifeway indicates the embeddedness, the sense of a woven sacrality. I want to talk more about that. If symbolic systems were the focus of my study, by the time I have a doctoral degree and have done a decade or so of work with Native people, I will be educated into what they're concerned, namely recovering the sovereignty of their own voice, surviving the centuries of oppression, and bringing forward their own voice with regard to what happened on their land as a people. So these equal type of analysis, a sense of civil system or religious lifeways, and also sovereignty, searching for voice. So let me conclude my comments with 2007 at the United Nations, the passage of the Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous People, UNDRIP for short. United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People. And it's a major document talking about the right for cultural ways, but most importantly, for my remarks tonight, the sense that indigenous people struggle to have prior and informed consent about what can happen on their land, what we impose upon them. So the sense then of Native people's presence and action.
And my entry is through another part of the world. I'm sure some of you have been to Asia, and rather disillusioned about the 60s after Nixon was elected, having gone to college in Washington, D.C., and very active in civil rights and the Vietnam War, and sure you remember these days.
Cannot understand you.
In Japan at a women's college, and that disoriented me, but it also changed my life because I realized, 2/3 of the world's people live in Asia, and I didn't know anything about that. Just like John, nothing in my college had prepared me to understand. So I began to study Buddhism and so on, and came back to the States, and that's when I met John, studying with Tom's very important, studying Confucianism and Taoism, these other traditions, Shinto, and so on. It was just fascinating. This is why I say worldviews matter. People are living with many different assumptions of what life means and what gives ethics force. So it was also clear that I began to study, went to China in '85 and traveled all through Asia in the 70s. It was a completely different place. It had not yet modernized. It had not yet industrialized. But those of us in Asian studies that studied at Columbia with some extraordinary professors really understood the spiritual dimensions of these religions. We had to do language, we had to do history, facts and thought. It was brutal one time. But with Tom's very also teacher helping us to see these traditions as living traditions and having implications for the day. But those of us studying Asia in particular began to ponder this question of a billion Chinese, a billion Indians, plus as industrialization and modernization took place in this part of the world, the planet would change. And that is fundamentally what happened, even though most Americans don't quite make the connection. That is what's the resources that are needed in these parts of the world, all through Asia, are absolutely enormous. And rapid industrialization brought major environmental changes. The water pollution, as we spoke about, imposed in China, and the air pollution. And when I first went to Beijing, people were riding bicycles, and now you can barely breathe. So the sympathy and empathy and yet complexity of modernization, right? The sense of destruction of land, health of people, and yet people want the fruits of modernity. This is very complex. So I'm just going to touch briefly. We're identifying in this talk more the Western values, eco-spirituality, and so on. But what attracted me in the Asian traditions, I'm sure some of you studied Buddhism and so on, so Buddhism has this tremendous sense of interdependence. We're all dependent on one another. More and more we realize that. Our families are nucleus. We're part of an earth family. So this deep sense of interdependence is what Buddhism offers to us. Confucianism, the tradition that I studied most, which has a huge influence all across China, Korea, Japan, Hong Kong, Singapore, is the force of education in this part of the world. But here's just one idea that has amazing implications for the environment, and that is qi. You've all heard of qi, qigong, matter energy. I do a little bit of qigong. It's fantastic when you can cultivate qi. So that idea of Confucianism, tremendous environmental implications. The matter and energy are one, separate, here, etc. And it's here from the very beginning in all life forms. Taoism, as Elijah is an expert on this and teaching a class on it, just very simply has this extraordinary sense of the identity of the human body with the body of the cosmos. And that we come out of this, and that this interaction is part of who we are, and all kinds of religious practices to support that and develop it. And there's many, many religions living all across Asia, John, and Korea. So that sacredness of nature is very much present in the Asian.
It's important in a talk like this to acknowledge that religion has definitely problems and problems. We're all familiar with the problems of religion, the sense of intolerance that we see in certain forms of religion, the fundamentalism, drawing back into certain guarded doctrines, and the generating conflict between religious communities. We've even seen antipathy towards science coming out of some religious communities. While not trying to erase that, we wanted to draw forward in this religion and ecology the promise of religion, and this promise is a variety of expressions. Pragmatically, there are large numbers of people who are committed to religious traditions. Some say as far as 85% of the human family is involved in formal religious activity. These traditions have incredible texts and wisdom traditions. They have amazing institutions, plants, schools, seminaries, hospitals. So the possibility of disseminating ideas is very profound in religious traditions. And finally, an openness to science is evident in many of these traditions. That brought us in the mid-90s in developing, as we came out of especially the Asian sedentary who was doing work on our PhD, and we were asking ourselves, what is it as historians of religion that we can contribute to environmental awareness? And we began to see that the religious traditions had in their histories instances where individuals and communities interacted with the local environment. They interacted with biodiversity, with ecosystems. So we decided when we went to Harvard to the Center for the Study of World Religion in the mid-90s that we would call together scholars of religious traditions and environmentalists who were associated with a particular tradition, and some scientists also. So we held 10 conferences on particular traditions. We began with Confucianism and then Buddhism, and we moved through these traditions over 3 years. Over 800 scholars came together, and we published volumes from all of these conferences. But I wanted to emphasize these 3 points for our discussion. Basically, the participants in these conferences approached their tradition from 3 standpoints. retrieval, reevaluation, and reconstruction. Namely, the retrieval, they look back in their tradition for those instances in texts or rituals or commentaries in the tradition where individuals or communities clearly interacted with the environment and made judgments or made observations and made decisions. With retrieval, then, the conference was reevaluated. Were these still germane? Were they perfect? Did they have traction today? If they did, how would the tradition consider reconstructing itself? For retrieval, reevaluation, reconstruction. The one example that is helpful for us, and maybe tomorrow will come up again, is the dominion in the first chapter of the book of Genesis. So the Western traditions have this sense of the human having been created in the image and likeness of God. This sense of 1:26 in Genesis of dominion over the creature. So that term in Hebrew, rada, what if we retrieve it? What was meant by that? Are there agricultural implications? Are there a sense of community that feels oppressed and is beginning to explore ways to pull itself back into order? What is meant by dominion? So the reevaluation of the term rada brought many of the Jewish scholars, especially for us Christians, and in the Islamic conference also, to an understanding that there were implications here of stewardship and the flourishing. So in a range of reevaluation. And we have seen since the mid-90s this field of religion and ecology growing, where now the reconstruction, I think, is part of what's going on in interreligious dialogue about the environment. So the volumes that came out of this, the World Religions and Ecology series, especially the Christianity and Ecology volume, the Indigenous Traditions and Ecology, these are available from Harvard University Press. We also have an Ecology and Justice series with Orbis books, which is one of the hearts of this Ecojustice series is Leonardo Boff's book, the Brazilian liberation theologian. He wrote a book called Cry of the Earth, Cry of the Forest. This was a major, and essential, a major influence on Pope Francis and his book.
So in addition, and we're saying this so that you can look on the website and refer to the introduction, but we did one of the first conferences on religion and ecology at Harvard Academy of Arts and Sciences. It was called Religion and Ecology and Climate Change. This is all the articles are on but we also intersected it with environmentalists, policy people. Bill McKibben was there, great climate change person. And we also have this website that we've worked on for 25 years that has statements from all of our communities. You can look on the Christian statements, Catholics, Protestants, Orthodox, and so on. And by the way, the Orthodox tradition has done so much, especially through the Greek Orthodox patriarch Bartholomew. Nina's tradition, that's something very important to say. Bibliographies, books, etc. But most importantly, there's engaged projects. What are people doing on the ground for restoration, forests, rivers, and so on? Measuring the carbon footprint. So if and when some of you are already doing this, and you can put your projects up here on this website so that other people can see. And we've recently launched an Ecojustice Hub. Ecojustice in many ways came out of the religious communities, especially in Warren County in North Carolina, where there's a huge issue of pollution of chemicals and so on. Maybe very aware that there's 17 principles of ecojustice, environmental justice, and it begins with the sense we live as part of sacred creation. So I urge you to take a look at that. We have a newsletter, comes out once a month, with lots of information, publications, projects, and this event is there, for example, but again, happy to have your event. And as was mentioned, we just launched 6 online classes with Coursera on the road to religion and ecology. One of the people from the Christian tradition is just on Christianity, because there's 2 billion Christians and so on. But Western religions, Asian and South Asian religions, indigenous religions. So brand new, they're free for audit. We hope that they'll be useful.
In the period from the mid-90s when we did the conferences at Harvard, we have initiated the Yale Forum on Religion and Ecology as a response then to bring the religious traditions more prominently into environmental issues, especially climate issues. The forum was established at the United Nations, a conference we held there, and it was in that period, after the Harvard conferences and began the culminating conferences, we realized that there was an educational field to be developed in this area. So while there was no academic discipline of religion and ecology, now we see this field is becoming robust, and there are literally positions in colleges, universities in this area. But along with the field, we try to emphasize force that religious environmentalism on the ground, it has traction on the ground. For example, energy audits in a church such as this. This is the kind of undertake to enter into it locally and understand the relationship of the ideas, concepts, the dogmas, along with the force of the tradition itself. To consider the field within academia, the sense of in religion and ecology is a forthright understanding that science and policy are absolutely necessary for understanding environmental issues that are climate emergency. But they're insufficient to understand how communities interact with the environment. And quite often the values that move people are religious values. Their understanding of community interaction with local life, with the natural world, is based on deep, profound, meaningful values. So spiritualities within tradition are part of the focus of this project. We begin to understand eco-spirituality within religious traditions. The force then for change in society is an effort to draw attention to the protection of the sacred earth community, especially from climate disruption. To realize that religions have the possibility to join into a resistance to exploitative projects, extractive projects that are damaging ecosystems, and especially to lend their voice to environmental racism, to the injustices that are imposed upon communities. Also, this is, I think, a major point for us tomorrow to think of the resilience that eco-spiritualities bring to a community to endure the climate pressures that we begin to feel. So rather than falling into burnout, a sense of eco-spiritualities and eco-justice as providing a way forward.
No, and just picking up that point, I think, as you probably know, our students, our children, are suffering from immense eco-anxiety, from climate despair, and so on. And what John has just said is that the wellsprings of these traditions can help people not fall into despair, disempowerment, or burnout, etc. We can talk about this, I'm sure, in the Q&A. But I want to come back, and here is Charleston, such an incredible, iconic southern city. I know this much about it. I've been delighted to be here a few times, 20 years ago, starting then. But what I want to say, what inspired us as well is civil rights. When civil rights began to take off, we grew up in the era where segregated, separate but equal was fine. No problem, right? Separate but equal. That meant housing, education, churches, almost all forms of life, separate but equal. Was it equal? Was it fair? And when that moral force began to seep into our consciousness, that was not an acceptable moral plan. When Mark Luther, it's been Black History Month and so on, but when Martin Luther King said, I have a dream, when he brought that joined in, I must say, religious leaders, even official, and so on. So Christians and Jews very much involved in those civil rights marches. The abolitionist movement, the Quakers, were keenly involved. And that, we have to remind ourselves, abolition took years and years and years. 40 years. Civil rights, years and years and years, and we're still working on it. We're still working on it. But that resilience that John referred to, that the moral force of religions addressing climate issues is responding to the destruction of people and planet, keeping these alive. That the social justice of these traditions is now merging with ecological justice. That's what's new. Now, we are talking on our website about climate emergency, not just climate change. Have you heard this term, climate emergency? Okay. So why are we using that term? Because, as wonderful introducer said, the IPCC report, Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, 270 scientists from all over the world, volunteer work, right? All hours of day and night, calling from time to time, working so hard. This latest report that just came out on Monday, I hope a few of you have missed all the other news that we're dealing with, but this is a very vital report. It's truly, truly vital. It indicates the intensity and the widespread devastation of climate emergency on every continent. Nowhere is free of this. We can't go for a meeting. The flooding here in Europe, the efforts to deal with that. Now, the pressure then for language of climate emergency is emerging in many parts of the world. Americans are still in our but the need for action is what climate emergency implies. Young people have been pressing for this. You heard the Sunrise movement here in the US? Sunrise. Take a look. They are pressing for these kinds of changes. Both justice changes, environmental protection. Extinction Rebellion in the UK is pushing for this. Fridays for the Future. You've all heard of Greta Thunberg and the students who have been striking for a long, long time, all over the world. The Welsh government, the UK government, the Irish government, all voted this is a climate emergency. We are still but the UN Secretary General, Antonio Guterres, both at the recent conference in Glasgow and with this report, his sense of alarm is astonishing. He says he's never read anything like this, the report that's come out on Monday. And very with other news in Russia and the UK, but it is so vital to the future of the climate. Now, if I could take a step back, and I hope I don't offend anybody here, but climate change is not a political issue. It's an issue for the survival of people on the planet. Scientists are not political pushes. They have been very objective, sometimes too objective. In fact, I'm not going to be honest, but IPCC reports, go Google, Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, 30 years they have been doing these reports. 30 years. Warnings, warnings, warnings. Now, alarm, alarm. The National Center for Atmospheric Research in Boulder, more than 12 years ago, we were invited to a conference of scientists there who were in such despair that it was the climate news public that they were in analysis, doing analysis. This was way before it turned out things right. Scientists are in despair. They started a group saying, we're not going to do the science anymore. Action. That also just came out. Imagine what they do day in and day out. If this is a country that takes defense and military seriously, which we certainly do, the Department of Defense for 30 years has also been issuing papers. Their latest one is this is a national security issue. All over the world are being flooded, markets are being flooded. Why is this news, even from our Department of Defense, not penetrating the American mindset? This to me is truly alarming. We have national climate assessment reports also that reported 8 years, the same kind of thing. Why is it been that? I was in class when it stopped doing stuff. But I think you know why it's not there. Misinformation, money for the oil industry, and we can go on and on and on. The point here is the impact of cost. But how much another summer of these fires? Can we imagine what California and all the Western United heartbeat for from a hotel, people are coming refugees from Interreligious. It is heartbeat. The rising cities that go to stay here in Charleston, weather-related products, hurricanes, agriculture, security. Here again, we're a business-minded society. My brother has been head of Southern Service in New York for many decades, moving to another position, but Chubb Insurance, sure, goes for a lot of problems. Swiss Re, the reinsurance companies know this. Financial industries from Wall Street are saying here in the news, our shirts, our economics. The cost of climate disaster, just last year, the extreme weather costs, $685 loss and $140 billion in damage. The costs around the world are Hurricane Ida was $65 billion, the largest one of our country. The European floods, $43 billion. Texas winter storms, $23 billion. Insurance industries are beside themselves. Why aren't they thinking the American people? Why aren't they on the It seems like it's going to continue to restore the same thing. Swiss Re, major financial reinsurance company, says $23 trillion in reduced annual global economic output worldwide will be a result of climate change by 2030. Not just insurance, the whole economy being affected by this. Okay, we agree. But we have to have this level of concern. Otherwise, we sit in complacency, indifference, denial, misinformation. The size and scale of this problem is incomprehensible. But we have got to get our minds on. We can't live and stew in denial and disempowerment. And here is the take home of this IPCC report. For the first time, misinformation. They say on the North American continent, but they're all references are right here. Misinformation has cost us so much time in responding to mitigation, adaptation, and so on. This is a moral issue, folks. This is a moral issue. Where is this coming from? What does social media have to say about this? To be highlighted in the international community for stopping responses to climate change to misinformation and denial. I go to lots of international conferences. We are outcasts. And accept the level of climate emergency. So, now we bring back into the possibilities. And I really need the possibilities of religion and a broad spiritual sensibility. Here from College of Charleston, with such a great interaction. A spiritual sensibility, a religious sensibility will help.
The roles of religion raised an immediate question following Mary Evelyn's remarks very apocalyptic sounding remarks, and that sense of the apocalypse is found very solidly in the Western traditions of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. And as we retrieve that and bring it forward, how shall we understand apocalypse? And indeed, how did the communities that wrote some of the central documents in which apocalyptic thought is presented? One thing we know for sure is that these documents were not directed towards simply pessimism or to be lost in despair. The very word apocalypse itself is revealing the future, opening the future. So the apocalyptic character, what we wanted to present in these remarks too, is that the roles of religion is encountering this apocalyptic period as a way to open itself to new understandings, new questions, eco-spirituality, eco-justice. One of the questions that presents itself in neon lights is, are certain forms of religion activating human mastery over an inanimate nature? This whole sense of dominion. And along with dominion, the objectifying of a dead nature we can simply extract and create anything we want. So suddenly the spheres of our atmosphere and stratosphere above us become places where we dump as we dumped in the water before it and saw it as somewhere that went away. Now we realize there is no way. And that the question of the human role confronts us. Is it dominion that we have played into, or do we need now to explore stewardship as a new understanding of our religious traditions? We have also in so many traditions that not only the Western traditions, salvation traditions especially, have this sense of a salvation in the West, outside of this world, into a paradise or a heavenly realm, apart from the fleshly or the material. In the South Asian world, while it's not completely the case, but the sense of a interior meditative yogic quiescence that is apart from the world of change, of dynamic suffering. Now we begin to see within all of these traditions, Western, South Asian, East Asian, that these anthropocentric oriented visions of an ultimate direction in the tradition need to be challenged. We need to understand the environmental call for new ethics. We have to raise the question, does nature have value in itself, or is it simply primarily for human use? One dimension in the religious world that has opened, especially in this century, 20th and 21st century, is the use of the word spirituality, which we're playing on here. We talk about eco-spirituality. We know that the religious traditions themselves have been vehicles for major spiritual dimensions. I'm thinking of in the Francis of Assisi, and the whole idea of the canticle to brother sun, a spiritual outreach to the natural world. And in mystical traditions within Islam, the Sufi tradition, very clear references to the sense of the ensouled character of the world. This sense of spirituality then raises the question that more than simply our religious traditions, but rather our interaction with the world itself has spiritual dimension. There's a law professor, rather well at NYU, Ronald Morgan. He has some major statements in this regard of exploring the nature of spirituality, and he made this comment: a religious attitude involves moral and cosmic convictions beyond simply a belief in God. That people have an innate, inescapable responsibility to make something valuable of their lives, and that the natural universe is gloriously, mysteriously wonderful. If I could just pull out, he mentions the cosmic, the sense of the super large, and he mentions the value of life, this relationship in the traditions, the macro world and the micro world. He's seeing spirituality moving in these realms. So is not only changing the face of the planet, it's changing the religions themselves. The climate emergency is broadening the nature of religion. We're beginning to see how religions are expanding ethical concerns towards nature. Rights of nature is beginning to have traction around the world now. We begin to see spiritualities that are expressly identified as the sense now of trees, of the relationship with trees, and understanding the signaling between the root system and fungi of trees, the understanding of environmental justice. These are issues that climate emergencies and the environmental issues bring forward. Along with it, then, we situate ourselves in a new understanding of who we are. That eco-spirituality is beginning to see the evolution of the human as coming out of our 13.8 billion-year-old universe. So there's an appreciation for the sacred universe out of which Earth evolved, and the valuing of the complexity of Earth and the interdependence of all life. So these new eco-spiritualities that are emerging in all of the traditions, it provides a realization that human life emerged from this universe-Earth process. And the challenge and the realization is that we are responsible for the continuity of this journey of the universe within the Earth community. In our exchange with Thomas Berry over the years, Thomas Berry, a cultural historian who passed on in 2009 at 94 years old, and it was from his 60s that he began to be aware that there was this new story of the human in the context of the evolution of the universe itself. And he called them to the telling of this new story as having direct relationship to our environmental concerns. So he articulated it this way. He said, at its core, even our spirituality is earth-derived. The human and the earth are totally implicated, each in the other. If there is no spirituality in the earth, then there is no spirituality. He attempted then to develop key ideas to begin to understand this spirituality of the human-earth relationship. He would talk about sacred universe. We dwell in a sacred universe. Talk about earth community. Living in an earth community. The sense of human-earth relationship with biodiversity, with ecosystem. Talk of as a communion of something. You put it this way. The universe is not a collection of objects, but a communion of facts. So a third theme that he put forward, and finally then great work, action. We would say that our great work as humans, as all human communities have been called over the centuries to their great work, it's creating a flourishing whole earth community. So sacred universe, earth community, communion of subjects, and great work provide a set of themes for looking at the Western traditions.
So, for example, eco-spirituality to Christianity. The sacred universe is creation itself, to be reverenced, to be cared for. The earth community is the dream of God, with no one with all creatures. The communion of subjects is I thou, with Martin Buber, which you books out the human relations, but it's also I thou with all of nature. And the great work, like the prophets, is justice and mercy, and that leads towards eco-justice. Now, eco-peace and peace is an example of Palestinians, Jordanians, and Israeli environmentalists who are working together to protect water and the future of life in the Middle East. They've created a green blue deal for the Middle East, which is a very bold initiative for climate security. Those of you who might read Tom Friedman in the New York Times, he's given a their head of the Israeli part, Robert, incredible person, so dedicated against so many odds. Now, if we go into the spirituality, this is similar. Sacred universe is creation. It's, how do we deal with that? The earth community for Christianity is the kingdom of God from an anthropocentric or human-centered to an eco-centered understanding of the kingdom of God. Human-centered is the kingdom of logos. But there's a principle that is wide, not just in the historical Christ figure, but logos from the beginning of the gospel. Center order dynamic. And the great work John has referred to stewardship or care for creation, and you can help. And there's a number of Christian groups on the website engaged projects, literally hundreds. Green Faith is one that began in the Christian tradition, it's not very Christian religious, working on climate change. I do want to hold up again, it's called the Green Patriarch. The Orthodox patriarch or volume living in this temple. He had symposium on water, where he invited UN, servants, he invited environmentalists, religious groups and communities. We were very privileged to go on 6 of those. And he would speak about ecological sin and crime relief. He's a very good friend of the Pope, which we'll speak about in a moment, but the two of them are really putting this forward.
We find also eco-spirituality emerging in Islam in terms of sacred universe at the heart of Quranic understanding of reality is the sense of unity that Quranic terms tawhid, the sense that the divine transcendent Allah has created all of this universe and the human is involved in Islam, that sense of recognizing the role of the human in this unity. The earth community is an extension of the actual formation of Islam. When Muhammad went to Medina from Mecca, that's the setting in which the Ummah, the community, was formed, the community of Islam. There's now happening within Islam a sense of extending the Ummah into the natural world, the communion of substance. So that this idea carries forward. Here, Islam is bringing forward another Quranic idea of balance, the need to maintain a balance so that the whole community can flourish, so that we can hear the voices. There's been a recent statement on using a balance for Muzan, the Quran, at the heart of this Islamic environment. And finally, we get great work. Again, there is a specific reference in the Quran to this amazing moment when Allah, before creation, to all of reality, extends the question, who will take responsibility for creation? And all of the creatures demur, they remain silent, and the human puts their hand forward. There's this absolutely beautiful moment in the Quran where Allah smiles at the foolishness of the human in thinking that they could take on this trusteeship, caliphate. Nonetheless, in the Quran, it is understood that the human carries the responsibility for this trust. So Islam is growing, it's searching within its own tradition also to understand these new calls that climate emergencies and the range of environmental problems are calling that religion to. In the UK, in England, the Islamic Foundation for Ecology and Environmental Sciences, IFES, is actively engaged in promoting these Islamic eco-spirituality, and the Muslim Khalid group at the Islam conference at Harvard and participated vigorously from the standpoint of the justice issue. He was the one who makes us aware that his foundation, IFES, is a call to the Muslim community to live up to their responsibility as guardians of Allah. This is the sense of responsibility to creation, and that this is a working for the livable earth and for all generations. So the eco-spiritualities that are emerging in the religious tradition are valuing nature not just for humans. These these eco-spiritual values and ethics are coming from religions now, the mystical traditions of these religions, and the nature spirituality. They are becoming a force for eco-justice in the tradition. They are promoting an understanding that human and nature is interconnected. That when we destroy healthy ecosystems, forests, fisheries, rivers, and wetlands, not only humans suffer, but biodiversity, the community of life suffers also. And that this suffering is especially intense among communities, the forest communities among them. And so we need to attend to that. And this is the force that's occurring in religious groups.
Some of you, I don't think you've heard the Pope's encyclical letter on Dr. Okay, that's good. Because Bill McKibben is one of the great environmentalists who wrote the first book really on climate change in Nature in 1989. He considers this the most important document of the 21st century. He's spoken in Yale a number of times. He really is a supporter of this view of the religions making a difference. But why? Again, there's 2 billion Christians, there's way over 1 billion Catholics, and so on. But the whole is addressing is all people around the world, are faith or not faith. And the document is beautifully written. One of the great Indian writers, Amitabh Ghosh, used this in the talk at Yale and saying how beautifully written it is, how powerful it's drawing us forward. What is it doing? It's bringing a vision of interreligious ecology. It's critiquing this instrumental use of nature that John's been referring to. It's critiquing a technological paradigm, saying we're going to fix this with geoengineering and so on and so forth. The technological fix, especially for Americans, is very attractive. But deeper values is what the Pope and other religions are inviting us. There's a whole chapter in there on spirituality, which is the call to all wonder, beauty, complexity. That's the heart of spirituality. It's all life. It gives us the energy to do the work. Ecojustice is something referred to earlier. The cry of the earth, the cry of the poor, coming out of liberation theology in Latin America. So it's a beautiful document. It's being used around the world. And part of this small Vatican that you can see around the world. This is really unique enough. Catholic bishops here have not picked it up. Conservative, but the Catholic Church with all of its problems, this is an astonishing emergence of a Pope who's believable, lovable, and a document that will really help us move forward. The 5th anniversary of it, he called for divestment, which we'll talk about in a few moments, but divestment of fossil fuel funds. Now, just to highlight, the People's Climate March in New York, 2014, we were there with our students from the School of the Environment. There were 400,000 people. It was the largest march of its moment. People from the UN talked to later, they were watching. People power, doesn't matter. 10,000 religious leaders were involved in this march. And that was when you could see the visibility. It was a big ceremonial at the cathedrals in John design that night. Again, people from all over the world, 1,000 people there. The Glasgow conference just recently, again, didn't get covered too well here in the States, but in November. But there were 3 groups that were really evident there on the outside. It's like all these conferences, good and bad, and problems and so on. But there's hope in these 3 groups, I think. Youth, seriously, youth. This is why we're so happy to be in touch with College of Charleston. Still have children. Our students are our children. The next generation. They leave these sleepless at night. But they were in the streets. They are asking for their future. The other groups that were there and evident more than most other were religious communities. Very, very And finally, importantly, and focused on indigenous groups were there asking for
It's helpful to consider three major problems that indigenous people in a planetary context are facing: the sense of persistent organic pollutants gravitating towards the pole. While Antarctica is not deciding indigenous people around the Arctic and in both the European side and the North American side, indigenous peoples there are subject to intense environmental pollution. Glaciation, indigenous peoples in so many parts of the world where glaciers are melting, they're dependent upon that water. And then the low-lying islands where indigenous peoples are bringing their voices, their sovereignty to resist the loss of their homeland. They begin to remind us that their sense of the sacred universe is respect for Mother Earth and allowing the flourishing of the Earth community, which they feel a sense of relationship, a kinship. This communion of subjects then is a recognition in many indigenous communities in very different ways of interiority in the world. This is very interesting. Now, the great work that many Native peoples are undertaking is rekindling the relationality of that. And the beautiful work by Kimber on great street practice, excellent statement. Among indigenous people, we find eco-spiritualities emerging on the ground as they begin to resist environmental projects that they see harming their kin. So they often bring it not as a resistance, but as protection. Protection of water. For example, the Standing Rock in North Dakota, the Hunkpapa people, they brought together a protection movement of environmental activism to protect the Missouri River water from the potential spills of the Dakota Access Pipeline. So that project has been halted at this point, but that idea in the indigenous community of practice on the ground continues in Minnesota, where the Enbridge Line Creek oil pipeline is being protested by Amish and other people there. And there again, they're using language like water is our medicine. So they're drawing on their religious tradition to talk about eco-spirituality, kind of that they are bringing political activity, cosmopolitics.
So we're coming to the end here, and thank you for listening so carefully. We're very much we can pick up energies. But the end point is, as Americans, because we're so pragmatic, what is the actions? We've given examples of some of them, but clearly action and engagement is very important. We do this. So education is huge. You've got to break through this denial. You've got to break through lack of understanding of the urgency. We have seminaries. We've been working in seminaries for a long time. All communities. There's schools, religious schools, and others, both high schools and colleges, measuring the carbon footprint, the energy that we're all using, taking responsibility for that, and finding alternative and renewable energies that are functional. We've got to scale up, and it is already scaling up. There's more workers in the renewable energy industry than even in the oil industry. I just read that preparing for this talk. But restoration projects that can be done, restoring rivers, restoring fisheries, taking down dams, restoring forests, and so on. Advocacy and organizing, communities have been doing that for a very long time. I want to just speak about one as we conclude here, and that is the investment in public schools. Investment in a moral issue. The Norwegian sovereign wealth fund that we can go on and on. Universities, the first one you know not yet, but moves forward, Harvard has. But investment is a moral issue. Again, we don't even help to start this. .org. So investing in possibilities contributes to great, substantial, and and injustice. Divesting from fossil fuels helps fulfill our moral responsibilities to promote climate action. And divesting and investing in renewables is an important way forward. Now, here's the really interesting thing. Again, I'm looking up the statistics because it's changing all the time. In October 2021, a total of over 1,400 institutions, which includes NGOs, colleges, and so on, representing $40 trillion in assets worldwide. Now, this is incredible. In a relatively short time. We were told by very good friends that this is not going to work. Not only work, it's very influential. But here's the really interesting thing. When you see the pie chart, the largest group involved in divestment is religious communities, 35%. Because religious communities help to start socially responsible investment, corporate social responsibility, their pension funds, and so on. We're not going to have to do more of that. Very influential for a long time. So, concluding here, we've been talking about this field of force, the eco-spiritual and eco-justice values, like Buddhism, and wisdom, and compassion, can move both together. The education and action, leadership, religious leadership has tremendous potential in the United Nations Environment Program. Now, we just had 2 weeks of meetings in the United Nations Environment Assembly, and all throughout was this representative of religious communities. And finally, but not least, resilience and inspiration. We need the inspiration to keep going. And that's what religious spiritualism can do.
I want to do my last little song and dance here. Every historian of religion tries to get a shot at what's the nature of religion? What is religion? What's going on? And we've got to come to this last sense that religions are oriented, grounding, nurturing, transforming, and that these activities are being affected by the climate emergency. Oriented, what does it mean for religions to provide upward sense of where we're going? Just think of the songs last week ago, that chariot or that place we're going to. Religions and their oriented capacity are not talking about a sacred universe. The sense of the evolutionary universe which has brought us to this moment, it's here, it's now, it's present. It's simultaneously transcendent and infinite. The sense of grounding, all of the traditions have been attended to our feet on the soil. I Sundance with the Crow people. When you go in the lodge to Sundance, no one's wearing shoes. Feet on the ground. Energies, the Crow said, coming up from the ground. Grounding, the whole idea of soils and tradition. Agriculture. The earth community then is not simply humans, but embracing all life forms, plants, animals, ecosystems, mountains and rivers. We have this call and this new musical note, grounding, orienting, grounding, so also nurturing. I don't think any of us in this sanctuary could think of a religious tradition at some point without talking food. I mean, we're all going after this to have some refreshment. I realize that food nurtures the body, nurtures the mind. The sense of nurturing in religious tradition is so interesting. As the communion of subjects, we now begin to understand that life processes are intervening. We're nurturing one another. We are food to one another. An Inuit elder some decades ago, she made that powerful insight. The problem with living is that you have to eat soul. And it's not just a dilemma also. Here is a woman who's talking about this stark realization and understanding that we nurture one another, that respectful relationship of food to one another. We are transformed in our religious practices. We grow through our life with religious ceremonials that allow us to shed and get on with the new standard. It's all like we're transforming it. It's climate change will transform us, isn't it? I mean, the climate emergency is already doing it. When you look at this novel that contains the novel, The Ministry of the Future, it opens up with a dialogue in India of millions of people when the temperature rises so high and the humidity is so high. This author wanted to shock people with an apocalyptic moment, but he moves in this novel towards an incredible eco-spirituality, a sense of what can transform the human community. So let us end with this statement from Thomas Berry as a way to think about eco-spiritualities in our climate era. It is this renewed sense of reciprocity with nature in all of its complexity and remarkable beauty that can help provide the psychic and spiritual energies necessary for the work ahead. Thank you very much for your time and attention. Let's have a conversation. You're still patient.
You are.
Before you are.
We kind of, but we did a lot of preparation for this talk. We wanted to connect with you all. And we haven't spoken that long, and you were extremely kind and generous to listen. And so we're very much looking forward to your comments and your questions, your disagreements. Yes, please. Just say your name if you can stand up. Yes. Oh,
I'm wondering, I kind of noticed that I had stuff, maybe it was about religion, spirituality, and such, but I'm kind of interested in how the world, I guess, aside from the Middle East, is deeply secularizing and religion's on the decline globally. You can speak up a little bit. Yeah. And so I'm just curious, how do you think that moves for our ability and how you just think of it secularizing in religion?
great point. Thank you. And when we should make that much more clear, because we're not advocating only for religions and religious institutions. When we say eco-spirituality, that is large. And of course, what we are trying to say is there's eco-spirituality in religion, but the nature sensibilities, there's a lot happening even in our society, paganism and so on. The nature writers in this country are some of the most inspiring. We had these nature writers on Zooms at our school, the environment, on trees. We talk about trees, including Robin Coomer, a book written to 9,000 people signed up. Why? Because they wanted to have this sense of the spirituality of nature. You see, the next one had 4,000 people sign up. So, yes. Namely, the world is becoming secular, but secular doesn't mean without spirituality. Right? That's the point. So you say, I'm religious, I'm not religious, I'm spiritual. This is food for life. I think fully without spiritual energy, spiritual hope, vision. I hope that is.
My name is Catherine the Great Law. I'm a minister of the movement and part of a domestic temple where we celebrate creation. And we come together in a circle under the living oaks or around the fire or in the sanctuary over in James Island. And it seems to me like when we come together in those spaces and then pray, and share brothers and sisters, when we pray to the water, we're at the river. When we pray to the air, we're on the mountain with drums and with dance and tobacco. So it's interesting to be here together in this such a beautiful cathedral space, but the only thing that's living in this space is us, is the human beings that occupy this space. So there seems to be a disconnect to me of what we're seeing in terms of the spaces, of course, within the Holy City, where there is so many people going to these more institutional religious spaces, but they're dwindling in population, as you know. There's a lot of more elders and less young people coming to those spaces. And so it's interesting too to see, our Father who art in heaven, and kind of reconciling that with our Mother who art on earth. And so, the divine feminine, and that rising of recognizing Gaia and property, and that energy of feminine. And so I'm curious how that plays out in your work, what you've seen, and how those pronouns may be shifting as we hold sacred space, and how we invite that. What you're talking about with nurturing, nourishing, these are all adjectives describing the mother, the feminine, and divine mother. It seems like she's wanting to have more of a place, especially around the time of crisis. So I'm curious how that's informed your work.
Thank you so much, Catherine. Yes, absolutely. And we share knowledge of creation spirituality and friendship with Matthew Fox. And Matthew Fox was deeply indebted to Tom Ferry and our good friend Ryan Sennett. So we're swimming in similar waters. But let me just be candid. To do this work in secular academia has been brutal. Okay? I went to Columbia, and Project at Harvard, and at Yale, in a very science-based atmosphere. You mentioned religion. They completely went through that. They're the only humanities people at the School of the Environment. They don't even take humanity seriously. They do not take social sciences. No. These people feel very devalued by science. We don't feel devalued because we're doing our work. We don't really care, but of course, if you start to care, it's disempowering. But my point is, secular academia, which the hierarchy is engineering and science, social science down here, humanities way down here. So just to get religion taken seriously, much less what you're talking about, which is fantastic. It's not to say that there's not courses on this. We have a robust fortunately environmental program like that. But it's not easy. But it's to say, I think the major changes that you've spoken about, ecofeminism, ritual practices, they're all coming from outside. And they look different from society. It's just we made our commitment to try and be ninja within very, very Byzantine systems. We like to say some seminaries are educating well for the 19th century. So opening these doors is extremely important to people beyond religions, to ritual practices, to nature-based practices, to feminism. Couldn't agree more.
Your remarks they recall to mind in the mid-1970s, Mary Ellen and I accompanied to a summit at St. John's, Interreligious summit, and rather moving to see the discussions that took place there. And in one of the panels, the Lieutenant Governor Langmuir was part of the panel, and when it came his time to speak, he stood up and he said, "This is a magnificent structure. It's possible to understand what moves people when you look at this type of setting." But he said, for my people, we would not enter into our religious practices in such a setting. Ours would be outdoor. You can see where he was going. That call, I think, has been reverberated. The wilderness movement, and we realize the issue with our wilderness thinking in this country, back to nature, all of those movements. I think what's happening now, though, is that we begin to realize whether we are out there or here, we are in the earth. is shaped by human hand, comes from out of the earth. And we raise our voices in and with the earth wherever we are. And I feel that mothering presence that you're speaking of is also possible to engender in new ways.
Beautiful floor. That's amazing. Let's just say more about this, but other comments?
So my name is Heather Mann, and I'm with the Humboldt Community of Engaged Buddhism. We have been talking at length about this window closing, and the science is not terribly accurate in knowing when the actual window is shut. And many are thinking that the window might have been closed. Which to me shifts the spiritual conversation into the realm of hospice. And I'm wondering if you might speak to that.
I hope everybody could hear that. We are at a tipping point, however you want to put it, very, very clearly. And yes, I think hospice is what we're doing in certain ways. There's no doubt. The head of the Climate Change Research Center in Potsdam, the largest scientific research center, Johan Rockström, in Sweden there, he talks about the overshoot in various areas, and you have the choice or overshoot. No question. I mean, who would have imagined that we were elderly, that we'd have rising streets and so on and so on? Who would have imagined? Look at Miami. Lots of things. Look at New York. And the village wall. Millions and millions of people close to water. Again, Bangladesh, so, John, you might want to jump in here, but I think we are between urgency, experience, and faith, between hope and despair. And that's what we have to negotiate. I've got boxes of diaries, and I think through for years and years and years. Because being in the science community means you get the information day in and day out. If you could sit in our auditorium at Yale School of the Environment, you're the wits out, seriously. And how do we give students a sense of what's their possibility, what's their life program? So then that's also mitigation and adaptation. That's what climate change is talking about. But I think we have to talk about this in schools, in nature, and elsewhere. We find generally the grounds of hope against all odds, against great odds. It's not a bright future. But I do think, and again, the inspiration of those who are sitting on that. Think about this, between non-violent civil disobedience, inspired by Thoreau's essay on civil disobedience, that one of the Gandhi, that one of the Martin Luther King. Just think about that. This is incredible. It's such a drama. This life force, this true force that Gandhi brought forward. Philip Glass's opera, such a drama, is incredible. And the cathedrals in John of the Divine, those people help support this opera that we're going to finish such a drama. Oh, yeah, came to sing, at this religious ceremony. It's mind-boggling. That's when we get home. When people, the really depressed people, who have been good, and there's people doing what we do.
For over 3 decades, we have been talking about the 6th extinction in our teaching in our classes. And that when we began to talk about that, students would look at us and they would be puzzled, and what do you mean by that? The loss of biodiversity. Now we no longer have to explain that to students. So that to me is one marker of the, not simply the realization, but there's soul work going on also, where people are beginning to realize what Johanna Mason talked about in terms of the nuclear age, how the environmental. But I used a phrase that I wanted to check with Eliza before I made the comment. In the Taoist tradition, in the Lao Tzu, one of the prominent documents of the Taoist tradition, before the current era, before the Christian era, this sense in the Lao Tzu, or this document says to the Taoist learner, know the right, but hold to the dark. In the Western tradition, we take right and dark and we right away spin them into either good evil or good bad or whatnot. That's not appropriate in the Taoist tradition. There's something else going on. And I think there's something similar to the questions you raised for us also. This incredible wall, to run up against this wall of the sixth extinction and to hold something sacred in the darkness of reality. Something very challenging there, but it's our call.
Why we need rituals of nature, why we need forest bathing, and so on and so forth. And I do want to say, even though we say secularization in Europe and in this country is very widespread, but India is a very religious society. Muslims, there's getting to be almost 2 billion Muslims. It's a pretty religious society. In Confucianism, in China, there's a huge revival of the Confucian tradition. That happens to be my special area of research and study. They are rereading their texts. We talked about this afternoon. And they're rereading it for environmental inspiration. That's one of the great things. Heaven is my father, earth is my mother. In this tradition, and even such a small child as I have a place in the midst. All people are my brothers and sisters, the most vulnerable for what we can do. They are repossessed. They have ecological civilization in their constitution as a human right and so on. So there's many angles, I think, is the point here. To restoration and resilience of ourselves is what this question, I think, is. And I'm aware of time, so maybe like one more question, because I know people are mostly hungry and separation. Well, I know that vegan dinner, right, is a way.
Thanks for your patience.